In the shadows of the American underworld, there exists a secretive brotherhood. Leather-clad and fiercely loyal, the Pagans Motorcycle Club isn't just one of the most notorious outlaw biker gangs in the United States. It's a criminal empire with roots stretching back to 1959. They weren't born in California like the Hells Angels or the Mongols. No, the Pagans came roaring out of Prince George's County, Maryland, and claimed the East Coast as their kingdom. Their bottom rocker doesn't say a state, it says East Coast. That wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a declaration of war. But to understand the Pagans, you have to know what they became by the 1980s and early 90s, when money, drugs, and firepower turned a once rowdy group of misfits into a highly organized and violent drug trafficking operation. In the spring of 1990, federal agents were chasing ghosts. A rolling meth lab, literally a mobile drug factory hidden inside an RV, was being used by the Pagans to produce millions in narcotics without ever staying in one place long enough to be caught. That lab traveled from upstate New York to Long Island, dipped into Pennsylvania, and even made its way into the back roads of North Carolina. It was a ghost on wheels, and it was designed by a man named Doc Martino, a former Navy chemist turned pagan meth cook. The DEA would later say that this mobile lab could manufacture up to $1 million worth of meth every month. It was part of a massive drug operation that saw the Pagans working hand in hand with other outlaw biker clubs and even members of Colombian cartels. Yes, you heard that right. Bikers and cartels swapping drugs and guns across state lines. One of the most shocking details, the lab was so sophisticated it had booby traps, pressure-sensitive explosives rigged under false flooring, tripwires near the back door. The message was clear. This was more than just a club. This was a paramilitary criminal enterprise. But crime, especially organized crime, leaves a paper trail. And by the late 80s, the feds were following the money and the meth fumes straight to the Pagans' inner circle. In 1989, West Virginia became ground zero. 35 members of the Pagans, including the club's national president and vice president, were arrested in a large-scale narcotics investigation. Charges ranged from trafficking to conspiracy. The club went quiet, but not for long. That same year, intelligence reports started pointing to Virginia, where the pagan nation was regrouping. Membership in the state exploded from just 5 known members in 1987 to over 45 by 1990. By August, state police and federal agents raided pagan homes across Richmond. More than 24 arrests were made. Among the charges, methamphetamine and cocaine distribution, motorcycle theft, and weapons violations. But still, they weren't done. In New York, the Pagans were pushing meth harder than ever. Authorities there uncovered what they called the largest mobile meth lab in the northeastern United States. It was a full-on chemical factory, mounted on wheels, hidden in the woods or parked in suburban garages. When agents finally shut it down, they found enough supplies to make millions in product and an arsenal of weapons, including silencers and AR-15s. 20 members were arrested. All pled guilty. You'd think a takedown like that would finish a club. But outlaw motorcycle gangs don't fold. They adapt. After the busts, the Pagans stopped using clubhouses. Too easy to surveil. Instead, they rotated meetings through members' homes. No paper trails, no witnesses. It was a direct response to the RICO indictments that nearly crushed them. They rewrote their bylaws, stripped down leadership visibility, gave fewer orders over the phone. The Pagan MC was transforming, becoming leaner, more covert, and more dangerous. In places like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, law enforcement noticed something chilling. The Pagans weren't just bouncing back, they were thriving. Virginia authorities said it plainly, the Pagans were becoming more powerful than ever before. To this day, the Pagans remain one of the FBI's Big 5 outlaw motorcycle gangs, alongside the Hells Angels, Outlaws, Banditos, and Sons of Silence. Their reputation isn't just about drugs or money. It's about violence. Brutal, unrelenting violence. From shootouts with rivals like the Hells Angels, to contract work with traditional organized crime families, the Pagans have written their legacy in blood. They've worked with the Bruno crime family on jewelry heists and extortion, provided weapons and training to far-right extremist groups. And inside prison walls, they've partnered with white supremacist gangs to maintain control. And yet, despite decades of law enforcement pressure, despite informants and RICO cases and massive raids, the Pagans ride on. So the next time you see a man on a Harley with a 1%er patch, ask yourself what road he's riding. Because for clubs like the Pagans, it's not just about motorcycles. It's about power, territory, brotherhood, and empire. In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, respect is earned in blood. And the patch? That's forever. It was September 2002. The smell of sea salt drifted through the air, mixing with exhaust fumes and the distant roar of Harley engines. Welcome to Wildwood, New Jersey, a sleepy beach town until the bikers roll in. The Roar to the Shore rally is supposed to be about chrome, leather, and the shared love of two wheels. But this year, that roar turned into a war cry. And the streets of Wildwood? They turned crimson. This is the story of one of the most violent public biker brawls in East Coast history. The Pagans versus the Hells Angels. A clash that would leave bodies on the boardwalk and bullets in the sand. The Pagans Motorcycle Club had long claimed the East Coast as their turf. Their bottom rocker doesn't name a state. It simply says East Coast. That's no accident. To them, everything east of the Mississippi was pagan territory. The Hells Angels, on the other hand, were expanding. Slowly, steadily, they were opening chapters in enemy territory. New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. And the Pagans? They weren't having it. Tensions between the two clubs had been building for years. In bars, on highways, in the shadows of strip clubs and tattoo parlors. But in 2002, those tensions exploded in broad daylight. It happened outside Captain Jack's Island Grill, right near the boardwalk, around 12:30 in the afternoon. Multiple pagan members spotted a small group of Hells Angels, including members of the elite New York chapter, entering the restaurant. Now understand something. When two outlaw clubs meet unexpectedly, there's a ritual. A stare down. A confrontation. But in Wildwood, the Pagans didn't wait. They stormed the Angels in a coordinated ambush. Witnesses said it was like a scene out of a movie. Dozens of men in leather and denim jackets, many with brass knuckles, knives, and collapsible batons, pouring onto the scene. Fists flew, bottles shattered, tourists screamed and scattered. Within seconds, the boardwalk was a battlefield. One pagan member, Mark Stoney Baker, was stabbed in the chest. He staggered out of the melee, bleeding heavily, and collapsed near a parked cruiser. He would later die from his wounds. Another pagan was shot and killed by police after allegedly pulling a weapon and refusing to drop it during the chaos. The Hells Angels? Several of them were severely injured, one with a collapsed lung, another with a fractured skull. This wasn't a scuffle. It was a full-blown gang riot in front of families, children, and vendors selling cotton candy. Police swarmed the area. Sirens screamed through the boardwalk. It was over in minutes, but the damage was done. Authorities arrested over 30 pagan members in connection with the brawl. Charges ranged from homicide to gang assault to weapons possession. Dozens of knives and other weapons were recovered from the scene. Some were stashed in trash cans. Others, still wet with blood, lay abandoned on the boardwalk planks. The state of New Jersey was furious. They called it an act of domestic terrorism, an outlaw biker war erupting in a family-friendly resort town. The Roar to the Shore rally was forever changed. Biker presence was scrutinized. Heavy police presence became mandatory in future years. And the rivalry between the Pagans and Hells Angels? It reached a whole new level of hate. The Wildwood Brawl wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a deeper war over territory, pride, and power. The Pagans saw the Angels as invaders. The Hells Angels viewed the East Coast as ripe for expansion. Neither side would back down. But what made Wildwood different was the timing. The attack was brazen, public, and fatal. It happened in front of families, cameras, and news crews. It forced the public to reckon with something law enforcement already knew. These weren't just bikers. These were organized criminals, armed, dangerous, and loyal to a code that most civilians would never understand. Today, if you walk the boardwalk in Wildwood, you won't see bloodstains. But the ghosts are there. Somewhere between the souvenir shops and seafood stands, the memory of that day lingers. The day when summer ended early, when chrome and leather turned to violence and chaos. The day the Pagans brought war to the shore. It was a Sunday morning in Orange County, Florida. Quiet, peaceful. The kind of morning where the only sound is birdsong and the occasional hum of distant traffic. But that stillness was shattered in an instant. February 21st, 2021. A man stepped out of a church in the Pine Hills neighborhood. He was a father, a biker, and a national officer in one of the most feared outlaw motorcycle clubs in the country. His name was Marcus Kong Thomas, a high-ranking pagan. Within seconds, he was gunned down in a hail of bullets. In a church parking lot. Broad daylight, execution style. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a message, sent with lead. To understand why Kong was a target, you need to know who he was. Marcus Thomas wasn't just another patch holder. He was a national sergeant-at-arms for the Pagans Motorcycle Club. That position? It's not ceremonial. It's enforcement. The sergeant-at-arms is the club's disciplinarian, enforcer, and internal security boss. He deals with traitors, handles club business, and ensures no one steps out of line, inside or outside the gang. Kong was known for being loyal, quiet, and absolutely ruthless when it came to club matters. He wasn't a loudmouth. He was a hammer. and he held influence not just in Florida, but throughout the pagan nation. Surveillance footage from the church shows Marcus Thomas exiting the building around 10:30 a.m. It was a regular service, a routine day, but two masked gunmen were already waiting in the lot. They didn't approach. They didn't argue. They opened fire immediately. Multiple rounds tore into Kong. He collapsed in the grass, and the shooters fled before anyone could stop them. By the time paramedics arrived, Marcus Thomas was pronounced dead. No arrests. No witnesses willing to talk. No surveillance that could ID the shooters. The police ruled it a targeted hit, not random violence, not gang crossfire. This was a planned execution. Now here's where the lines blur. Some in law enforcement believe the killing may have been internal, a power struggle within the Pagans. Just months earlier, the club had undergone a rapid expansion in Florida and the East Coast, known as the Blue Wave. With growth comes politics, and with politics comes betrayal. Was Kong a victim of a leadership shakeup? Others believe this was a rival club hit, possibly orchestrated by the Outlaws motorcycle club, who dominate Florida and have been locked in a decades-long war with the Pagans. The Outlaws are known to defend their turf with extreme prejudice. If Kong was trying to set up pagan operations in the wrong zip code, that might have been enough to sign his death warrant. And then there's the third theory: law enforcement. Some in the biker underworld whisper that Kong was being watched by federal agents, and that the hit was a cleanup move, made by someone trying to keep secrets buried. Whatever the truth is, nobody's talking. And inside the pagan nation, silence is loyalty. Here's what makes this case different from typical OMG violence. This wasn't a back alley stabbing. This wasn't a bar fight gone bad. This was a targeted, daytime execution in front of a church. It shook the biker world. Not because someone died, but because of how it was done. This was brazen. This was personal. And this was intentional. Since Kong's death, tensions have simmered in Florida. Law enforcement has increased surveillance on both the Pagans and their rivals. But on the street, it's quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't last. Marcus Kong Thomas was buried with full pagan honors. His brothers rode with him one last time, engines thundering like a war cry. But the questions still echo across Florida. Who killed Kong? Was it a rival? A traitor? Or someone much closer? One thing's for sure. In the outlaw world, the patch may be earned in loyalty, but it's often paid for in blood. The Mafia wore suits. The bikers wore leather. But in the underworld of Philadelphia, the line between the two blurred, until blood, bullets, and money tied them together. This is the story of a criminal partnership between the Pagans Motorcycle Club and the Bruno Scarfo crime family. A deal forged not in smoky backrooms, but in the alleys of South Jersey and the docks of Philly. A union where brass knuckles met Cosa Nostra politics, and outlaw bikers became hired guns for the mob. The Pagans MC have ruled much of the East Coast biker scene since the 1960s. By the 1980s and 90s, they weren't just outlaws. They were businessmen, moving meth, running extortion, and offering what every crime boss needs most: muscle. The Bruno Scarfo crime family, meanwhile, was one of the most feared mafia organizations in the United States. An old-school La Cosa Nostra outfit, rooted in Philadelphia and South Jersey. But by the early 90s, the mob was under siege. Federal indictments, wiretaps, RICO cases. They were losing soldiers faster than they could make them. That's when the Pagans entered the picture. With numbers, firepower, and zero fear of the law, the mob needed muscle. The Pagans needed connections. And together, they formed a criminal alliance that shook the entire eastern seaboard. Court records, surveillance, and wiretaps later revealed the depth of the partnership. The Pagans ran collections for loan sharks, threatening and beating down debtors who owed the mob. They were used in jewelry store burglaries, busting in with brute force while the Bruno family fenced the goods. They ran extortion rackets targeting strip clubs and bars, where if owners didn't pay, their buildings mysteriously caught fire. Or worse. And most chilling of all, they were used as disposable hitters. Hired hands for beatings, arsons, and even alleged contract killings. The bikers did what the mob couldn't afford to be caught doing anymore. The Mafia became more like the boardroom, and the Pagans? They were the hammer. Money moved fast. Methamphetamines flowed through pagan channels, while the mob handled the cash. One fueled the street, the other cleaned it up. Pagans also tapped into union intimidation, helping the mob influence labor contracts, including garbage collection and construction in South Jersey. The key to this alliance was loyalty through fear, and no one crossed either side without serious consequences. In multiple interviews, former law enforcement officials said that it became nearly impossible to distinguish where the mob ended and the Pagans began. They shared safe houses, lawyers, and even family ties. Some pagan members married into mob-affiliated households, but all criminal empires have a shelf life. By the early 2000s, federal agents had built an ironclad case. Using RICO statutes, undercover informants, and wiretaps, they finally had enough to bring it down. In a massive bust, multiple pagan members were arrested, some for extortion, others for meth trafficking, and a few for acting as enforcers for the mob. Simultaneously, mob turncoats started flipping, providing detailed accounts of pagan cooperation in violent crimes. In one case, a pagan enforcer was caught on tape discussing a planned hit for a Bruno family capo. The target survived, but the indictment stuck. Court documents revealed that the pagans were paid thousands per job, often in cash or untraceable narcotics, to do the mob's dirtiest work. The message was clear. The bikers weren't just riding in the same neighborhoods. They were running the streets, hand in hand with the Mafia. Today, both organizations still exist, the pagans and what's left of the Philadelphia mob. They've taken hits, lost leaders, and survived countless RICO prosecutions. But whispers still circulate among federal task forces that some of the old connections remain, that in the quiet corners of South Jersey, pagan chapters still operate with Mafia blessing. That old friendships forged in blood and violence are hard to break. The only thing louder than a Harley engine in those neighborhoods? Silence. What happens when biker chaos meets mob order? You get a partnership built not on trust, but on fear. One where leather jackets replace pinstripes, and the oath isn't to God or country, but to the patch and the family. The pagans didn't just work with the mob. For a time, they became the mob's fist. And the streets of Philadelphia still remember the bruises. The Coffin Cheetahs MC is one of the most well-known outlaw motorcycle clubs in Australia, with a history of violence, drug trafficking, and deadly rivalries. Unlike larger 1% clubs like the Bandidos, Hells Angels, and Mongols, the Coffin Cheetahs have remained somewhat under the radar, but their presence in Western Australia and their clashes with rival clubs have made them a significant force in the outlaw biker world. The Coffin Cheetahs MC was founded in Perth, Western Australia in the early 1970s. Unlike other Australian outlaw motorcycle clubs, which often have American origins, the Coffin Cheetahs are an independent Australian club that has resisted influence from larger international organizations like the Hells Angels and Bandidos. From their base in Western Australia, the Coffin Cheetahs expanded across the country, with chapters in Queensland, South Australia, and Victoria. They also established international chapters in Norway and Indonesia, making them a global presence in the outlaw biker world. The Coffin Cheetahs are a 1% motorcycle club, meaning they reject mainstream motorcycle culture and live by their own rules. Over the years, law enforcement has linked them to drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and organized crime activities. Police investigations and reports have accused the Coffin Cheetahs of running methamphetamine and cocaine distribution networks, with connections to biker-linked drug syndicates. However, like most outlaw clubs, the Coffin Cheetahs deny criminal involvement, claiming to be a brotherhood of motorcycle enthusiasts. One of the biggest reasons the Coffin Cheetahs are feared is their history of violent rivalries with other outlaw motorcycle clubs. Their biggest enemies include the Pagans MC and the Hells Angels MC, both of whom have engaged in bloody conflicts with them over territory, drug trade dominance, and club politics. One of the most infamous incidents involving the Coffin Cheetahs was the 2001 Gold Coast riots, where members of the club were involved in a brutal public brawl with the Pagans MC at a motorcycle show. The fight, which included knives, bats, and gunfire, escalated the war between the two clubs. In 2010, a Coffin Cheetahs member had his fingers severed with bolt cutters by Pagans MC members in an act of brutal retaliation. This gruesome attack was a clear message that the war between the clubs was far from over. The Coffin Cheetahs have also been involved in clashes with the Hells Angels, especially in Western Australia, where the two clubs have fought for control of illegal operations and club dominance. Like many 1% outlaw motorcycle clubs, the Coffin Cheetahs have been heavily targeted by Australian law enforcement. With the rise of anti-biker laws in states like Queensland and Western Australia, police have raided their clubhouses, seized weapons and drugs, and arrested high-ranking members. The Australian government has classified them as a criminal organisation, meaning that members are restricted from associating in public and face harsher penalties for gang-related offences. Despite these efforts, the Coffin Cheetahs remain active, continuing to operate their clubhouses, recruit new members, and defend their territory against rivals. Despite decades of police pressure and violent wars, the Coffin Cheetahs MC is still one of the strongest outlaw clubs in Australia, especially in Western Australia. Unlike clubs like the Bandidos or Mongols, they have not expanded as aggressively, preferring to keep their membership tight and controlled. With ongoing conflicts with the Hells Angels, Pagans, and Rebels MC, the future of the Coffin Cheetahs remains uncertain. Whether they continue to dominate in Western Australia or fall to rising clubs depends on how they navigate law enforcement crackdowns, club wars, and the ever-changing outlaw biker landscape. The ongoing conflict between the Coffin Cheaters MC and Pagans MC is one of the most violent and bitter biker wars in Australia's outlaw motorcycle scene. Beginning in 2010, this brutal rivalry has involved public brawls, assassinations, bombings, and gruesome acts of retribution, cementing their status as two of the most feared clubs in the country. The Coffin Cheaters MC and Pagans MC had already been rivals for years before the violence erupted in 2010. Both clubs were competing for dominance over drug distribution, weapons trafficking, and illegal enterprises in Western Australia and Queensland. The Coffin Cheaters, a long-established club with deep roots in Australia, viewed the Pagans as aggressive up-and-comers who were trying to encroach on their turf. The Pagans, known for their reckless and violent reputation, were rapidly expanding, attracting younger, more volatile members. Their aggressive recruitment and willingness to challenge established clubs made them natural enemies of the Coffin Cheaters. The conflict escalated in October 2010, when Pagans members ambushed a group of Coffin Cheaters at a Perth motorcycle show, leading to a brutal public brawl. The attack, which involved knives, bats, and fists, left several bikers injured and marked the beginning of an all-out war between the two clubs. In retaliation, the Coffin Cheaters launched a series of counterattacks, targeting high-ranking Pagans members in an effort to send a message. The violence quickly spiraled out of control, with both clubs engaging in street fights, home invasions, and assassination attempts. One incident in the conflict came shortly after the 2009, when Pagans members captured a Coffin Cheaters associate and robbed him for his cash. The brutal act was meant to send a warning that the Pagans were willing to take the war to a new level of brutality. This act of disrespect shocked even the hardened outlaw biker community and intensified the war. The Coffin Cheaters retaliated with targeted beatings and shootings, fueling the bloodshed even further. Between 2011 and 2015, the war continued with drive-by shootings, firebombings, and revenge killings. Both clubs attacked each other's clubhouses and safe houses, forcing police to increase surveillance and raids on their operations. In 2012, a Pagans member was shot outside his home in Western Australia, believed to be a revenge hit ordered by the Coffin Cheaters. Later that year, a Coffin Cheaters clubhouse in Perth was firebombed, an attack widely believed to be retaliation from the Pagans. In 2013, the Pagans MC made a shocking move by merging with the Mongols MC, one of the most feared outlaw motorcycle clubs in the world. The Mongols, known for their ruthless tactics and international connections, gave the Pagans more firepower and backing in their war against the Coffin Cheaters. With Mongol support, the Pagans increased their attacks, targeting Coffin Cheaters members in ambushes, bar fights, and home invasions. In response, the Coffin Cheaters reinforced their alliances with other clubs, including independent gangs willing to go to war alongside them. As the violence escalated, Australian authorities intensified their crackdown on outlaw motorcycle clubs. Police launched Operation Ironfish, a task force aimed at disrupting biker-related crime and dismantling drug networks linked to the Pagans and Coffin Cheaters. As these clubs became deeply involved in organized crime, the Australian government launched an aggressive crackdown, introducing some of the strictest anti-bikie laws in the world. These laws have banned club gatherings, outlawed certain clubs altogether, and given police unprecedented powers to disrupt their activities. The rise in violent gang wars between clubs like the Coffin Cheaters, Pagans, and Hells Angels played a major role in prompting the government to take extreme measures. Events like the 2001 Gold Coast riots, the Milpera massacre of 1984, and the 2010 Pagans vs. Coffin Cheaters conflict exposed how outlaw motorcycle clubs were operating as organized crime syndicates. The Waco Twin Peaks shootout in Texas in 2015, where 9 bikers were killed, also raised concerns that similar large-scale biker conflicts could explode in Australia. As a result, state governments across Australia introduced laws that effectively criminalized outlaw motorcycle clubs and their members, restricting their ability to operate openly. Several states, including Queensland, Western Australia, and New South Wales, passed laws declaring certain motorcycle clubs as criminal organizations. Under these laws, the Coffin Cheaters, Bandidos, Pagans, Mongols, and other clubs were effectively outlawed. Members of these clubs could not gather in public, wear their colors or patches, or even associate with each other. The government labeled this as a way to disrupt organized crime, but bikers saw it as an attack on their lifestyle. The 2013 Vicious Lawless Association Disestablishment Act, VLAD, in Queensland introduced the harshest penalties for anyone associated with a banned motorcycle club. Under these laws, bikers could be arrested simply for being in the same place as another known member. If 2 Coffin Cheaters members were caught having a drink together, they could face serious charges. This also applied to family members, mechanics, tattoo artists, and even lawyers who worked with club members. Many states banned the public display of outlaw motorcycle club patches, colors, and insignias. In places like Queensland and Western Australia, members of the Coffin Cheaters and other clubs cannot wear their club vests in public. This move was aimed at stopping intimidation and gang recruitment, but bikers saw it as an attempt to erase their identity and culture. Law enforcement introduced targeted raids on clubhouses, homes, and businesses owned by bikers. Police were given special powers to raid bikie clubhouses without a warrant, and governments expanded covert surveillance on clubs, including phone taps, informants, and undercover officers infiltrating clubs. Bikers could be pulled over and searched at any time, even if they weren't suspected of a crime. In 2017, the New South Wales government introduced special prison units for bikers, known as Supermax-style bikie isolation units. These facilities were designed to keep high-ranking bikers from communicating with their clubs while behind bars. Inmates in these units faced harsh restrictions, including no communication with other members, limited visits and phone calls, and solitary confinement for long periods. This was done to break biker loyalty and reduce club influence inside prisons. As one of Australia's oldest and most secretive 1% clubs, the Coffin Cheaters MC was deeply affected by these new laws. The ban on club gatherings made it harder for members to meet without risking arrest. The restrictions on wearing colors forced them to operate more covertly, and law enforcement raided their clubhouses multiple times, seizing weapons, drugs, and cash. Despite these crackdowns, the Coffin Cheaters have continued to survive. They adapted by becoming more secretive, avoiding media attention and working through underground networks. Unlike clubs like the Mongols or Bandidos, the Coffin Cheaters have not expanded as aggressively, which has helped them avoid full-scale government bans like those imposed on the Finks or Hells Angels in some areas. Despite these harsh restrictions, outlaw motorcycle clubs are still thriving in Australia. Many clubs, including the Coffin Cheaters, have gone underground, avoiding public clubhouses and traditional meeting spots. Some members removed their patches but continued criminal activities in secret, while others relocated to different states or countries to escape police pressure. One major unintended consequence of these laws was that it forced clubs to operate more like organized crime syndicates. Instead of being visible in public, many outlaw clubs became harder to track and used new tactics to conduct their illegal business. Despite the anti-bikie laws, Australia still sees violent clashes between motorcycle clubs, proving that these laws haven't completely eliminated outlaw biker crime. The Australian government continues to expand its anti-bikie measures, and many law enforcement agencies are pushing for even stricter bans. However, outlaw motorcycle clubs, including the Coffin Cheaters, are still active, proving that the 1% lifestyle is not easily destroyed. As police pressure increases, clubs will have to evolve and find new ways to operate, discontinuing the use of smartphones, increasing alliances, and working with the cartels. The war between bikers and the government is far from over, and as long as clubs like the Coffin Cheaters exist, the Australian